needed than today. The educational disruptions and school closures caused by the COVID-19 pandemic have confirmed the crucial role of teachers in maintaining learning continuity, but also in sustaining the very dynamics of households and also communities in that regard. In the current crisis, we have witnessed how teachers have gone beyond the call of duty. What have they done? They have prepared take-home packages for the students living in rural and remote areas that lack the connectivity and also the technologies needed to pursue online learning. They have adapted their practice and diversified the formats, the means and the contents of education to cater for the needs of the learners, including their socio-emotional well-being. They have preserved and reinforced social interaction among the learners, fellow teachers and also the school communities, often checking in on students via social media and messaging systems and exchanging practices and resources with other practitioners, enhancing a sense of community within the profession. Against this background, it is important for all of us who have passed through the hands of teachers to reflect on the crucial role of teachers they have played in our individual lives, our communities and the entire country at large, in a way of commemorating the World Teachers' Day. To help us appreciate the role of teachers and also shine a light on their suffering during this pandemic, I'm now joined by Dr. Kedra Agenda. She is the Director, Education Standards Unit at the Education Ministry, Dr. Dennis Mujimba, the Public Relations Officer at the Education Ministry, Theobald Baguma, the Secretary General for the Uganda National Teachers Union, UNATU, and Mr. Charles Rekabo, the Programs Coordinator at the UNESCO Project Office here in Kampala, many of whom join me right here in studio. We have Mujimba via Zoom, who will be joining us online. A very good afternoon, gentlemen and lady.
Good afternoon.
All right, I'll start with the Programs Coordinator at the UNESCO Program Office here in Kampala. That is Mr. Charles Rekabo. He's going to be explaining to us what is World Teachers' Day. All right, give us a brief preamble of the history of World Teachers' Day, 1966, 1994, and 1997. What should we know?
Thank you very much, Romeo, and good evening to you, all those who are listening to this very important program today. Let me start by congratulating all the teachers who are listening here, and those who are not watching this, you may need to communicate to them our big congratulations to them. We recognize them when we're celebrating this World Teachers' Day 2021. The theme for this year, to begin with, is teachers at the heart of education recovery. And we are celebrating this in Uganda on the sub-theme of the call for greater investment in teachers and in teaching, especially in Uganda. You asked the question, why do we labor to celebrate this World Teachers' Day, and how did it come into existence? This World Teachers' Day was instituted by UNESCO and International Labour Organization, ILO, and other partner organizations on 5th of October 1994. It was instituted to commemorate the anniversary of the adoption of the 1996 UNESCO ILO recommendations concerning the status of teachers. And these international recommendations, which were made, as I said earlier on, in 1966, whose normative values is recognized across many countries, was initially put in place to set out the rights and responsibilities of teachers, as well as the standards of the teachers in their initial training, during their continuous professional development, their recruitment, their deployment, their employment, and the teaching and the learning conditions. It also contains numerous recommendations for teacher participation, especially in decision making. So to say, how do the teachers get engaged in making policies that are favorable to them? Now, in addition to this historical achievement, the World Teachers' Day also commemorates the day of adoption in 1997, when UNESCO also made further recommendations concerning the status of higher education teaching personnel, which sets out, among others, the rights and responsibilities of teaching and research staff in higher education learning. The adoption of the 2020 agenda under the Sustainable Development Goal, which was endorsed in 2015, in particular, the Sustainable Development Goal 4 on education further confirms the need, which is very there in order to achieve our education agenda. It is therefore particularly under the target 4C4, outlines the rights and the responsibilities and the welfare and the privileges of teachers. So that sends us the background from which every year, every other year, themes are shared in order to recognize teachers, to appreciate teachers, but also to call on to people to be able to value teachers just like they would value any other profession. Now, in this particular celebration for this year, as I said earlier on, we are looking at the situation of how do we celebrate our teachers with the greater call for investment in teaching and in learning. How do we celebrate this to ensure that the investment in teaching is scaled up? And why would we want to do that? We know we're just in the situation of COVID. My colleagues will elaborate more on that. But it has taught us a lot of things that we need to highlight that signifies the teacher's role in all this. There's need, therefore, for us to invest in teachers so that they can adapt to the new situation. For example, the well-being of the teachers we need to address, because many of the teachers, as we will hear, had to look for alternative way of survival. So we need to address the welfare of the teachers. So that calls for greater investment. We need to invest in pedagogy to change, because now initially the learning was through face-to-face. Now we have to adapt because there's virtual learning, but the teachers are not equipped. So we need to realign our pedagogy, our learning approaches to be able to reflect that. Also, we need to invest in growth and development of these teachers. We need to invest more in infrastructure to be able to accommodate the increasing number and in the context of the crisis that's happening now. Because if you say we need to observe standard operating procedures for schools to open, that means there's greater need for investment, even in infrastructure. Lastly, there's also need for us in investment in overall infrastructure of the education sector. So I think when we address all these and scale up the investment, we'll be speaking to the teachers whose motivation, whose morale, whose appreciation of the work is scaled up, and therefore the quality of life of the teacher will be raised, and the learners will benefit from a motivated teacher who's able to deliver well.
Mr. Drakabo, when you say rights and responsibilities of teachers, what exactly do you mean? What are their rights in that regard?
First of all, we know that education is a right. Everybody has a right to education. And therefore, at the center of education is the teacher. They say the quality of education in a country is as good as the quality of a teacher. So the right, it's therefore the right of the teacher to gain equitable quality education and skills that's needed for him to, or for her to deliver. And similarly, the teacher now has a right to deliver. So it's both the responsibility to deliver on what the teacher has learned, but a right of the teacher to be facilitated and supported with all the basic ingredients that will make the teacher deliver.
All right.
Yeah.
That is Mr. Charles Drakabo, the programs coordinator at the UNESCO program office here in Kampala. Let me also bring in Philbert Baguma, the Secretary General of the Uganda National Teachers Association, to actually talk about the plight of the teachers during this COVID-19 pandemic. Well, Mr. Philbert Baguma, talk to us or give us a situational analysis of the state of welfare of the teachers during this COVID-19 pandemic. How have they been faring during this COVID-19 pandemic, if you will?
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, you are asking me the obvious. How have they been faring? The situation has not been all that good, but we thank God that a number of them are still surviving. First of all, COVID-19 scored us in the opposite direction in terms of the teaching learning process, because it came in and we had not planned very well for the unknown, and when it came, the teaching learning process came to a halt. We have struggled to come out of that halt, but the more we struggle, the more we create discrimination, because those who have continued to survive, Those who don't have continued to go down.
The private teachers.
Now, we are looking at the teacher in the COVID-19 pandemic. The teachers, to begin with, suffered psychological torture. You know, the year has just started, you have gone to work. All of a sudden, schools are closed. But even when they are closed, you don't know the timeline, and you may think, yes, we are coming back soon. And days continue, and we kept guessing, both the teachers, the parents, the learners, and any other stakeholder. Now, for the teachers, it became worse when it came to those in private institutions, because their earning comes in when the parents pay the dues, and then the teachers are paid the salary. But even for those in public institutions, you know, you have a budget, you know the children are going to be in school for 3 months, you don't have the money you budget at home. All of a sudden, you have already paid the school fees, they are back, and you must take care of them. So the situation has not been good. Now,
especially for private teachers, because we do know those in public institutions were still getting some kind of pay, courtesy of government.
Yes, they were still getting some kind of pay, but like I told you, you have a budget, you have a program, and all of a sudden,
it's disrupted.
It's disrupted, and then you have to begin afresh. COVID-19, of course, came with challenges. One of the challenges is that coping with e-learning has become a hard nut to crack, because we have teachers in categories. There are those who qualified during the analog times. There was nothing like a computer laboratory in the training institution. They have not had access to them. But now you cannot have face-to-face sessions. You must struggle to make sure you fit in the new environment. That was not very easy, although even connectivity became a challenge. Those who would want to try and help and support the learners, it was not easy because of poor connectivity. Now, the teachers all along kept on thinking it is coming nearer to reopen, and they would actually, some of them did not make use of the lockdown because of thinking they are about to go and could not go for other businesses. But there are those who from the onset went and did something for themselves. So we have had challenges, we have learned lessons during COVID-19 and the lockdown, and I think getting out of the lockdown, we shall come out when we are different people. For those who will manage to come back, there are those who have found treasure outside there, and they are saying, okay, we didn't know that this was also there. We have those categories. But there are those who are still committed, they have the calling. Come when the schools reopen, they will definitely come back and reopen and begin teaching. COVID-19 has brought a new phenomenon. People used to think teachers don't do work. And this was because they see learners going to school, learners coming back, and they thought that was a simple thing.
I see.
But this COVID-19 lockdown has proved beyond reasonable doubt that the school is the safest place for the learners. And the teachers have the art of taking care of the learners. Today, if you asked people, if there was a question posed to the stakeholders before COVID-19, and you asked the same question today, you would see how much change they have in terms of mindset towards the work that the teacher does. They have come to appreciate that, yes, teachers play a very good role. They need to know that among the professions, it is the teacher who is a true friend.
Indeed.
Because the teacher wants you to be educated and get out of ignorance. Unlike others who may wish something to happen so that they get what to do. I don't want to open that story.
Pandora box. Go ahead.
But it is the teacher who is actually the true friend. And because of that, we are bringing out an idea of having appreciate my teacher. Even those who are watching this program, we want you to come out, the teacher who made a difference in your life. You will not mention all the teachers, but you have that very teacher who made a difference in your life. Call and mention his name and say, I am so and so, I appreciate teacher so and so for what he or she did to my life. Appreciate my teacher week will be to appreciate the role the teachers do in nation building, like UNESCO did far back 1966 with ILO. They were looking at what teachers are capable of doing in nurturing in nation building. Today we tend to forget. So we are making a call. And this appreciation of the teacher week is under a big theme of education still matters.
Indeed.
Some people have thought that closing schools is an end in itself, and they are losing hope. But we are saying no, it is not lost. We still have room. We still can pursue education. The learners can still pursue their dreams, and then we move on. And we need to continuously remind them. We need to reassure them so that they don't lose hope in education. And the teachers are very ready. Come the time when schools reopen, the teachers will go there. Amidst the challenges they have gone through, they will still be ready to go.
Philbert Baguma is the Secretary General for the Uganda National Teachers Association. Thank you very much for that submission. Let me also bring in Dr. Kedras to the agenda. She is from the Education Standards Directorate under the Ministry of Education and Sports. Dr. Kedras, to the agenda, I would like to know what kind of interventions you've put in place as the Education Ministry, if you will, to ensure improved livelihoods of the teachers during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Romy, for hosting us this afternoon, but also thank you, viewers, for finding time to come and listen to what I consider the most important discussion for every family, for everyone. Indeed. One of the exciting things about education is that almost every family is a stakeholder in education. You either have the children, or the grandchildren, or whoever else is there. And so all of us are very interested in what happens in education. And of course, education is the real foundation of every nation. If you have a good quality education, you are sure of a good nation, both now and later. So as a sector, we know, we treasure. We treasure our teachers, we treasure their contribution. Research shows that the greatest contribution to learning for all children is from their teachers. So when teachers are happy, as Philbert has said, when teachers are focused, when teachers are excited and motivated, then learning happens. Because once teaching is effective, learning becomes effective. And once learning is effective, then the learning outcomes improve, and then the children themselves or the learners and their families gain in the long run.
Indeed.
So we value teachers as an education sector. We know that they form the core for what we do. Without teachers, there will be no education, really. We know that the focus of education is the learner, but the person to really cause that learner to be what you want him to be, to develop holistically, to develop in his mind, in his thinking, in his analysis in the mind, to develop in his heart or in his values and attitudes, to develop in his hands and be able to have skills and contribute to society. It all lies with what the teacher is able to do. So yes, as a sector, when we closed, we had about 550,000 starting from preschool up to university, teachers and lecturers and instructors who went home. And as Philbert has said, we thought it was 2 weeks, 1 month. It has strolled on almost 2 years. So a number of initiatives are in place. One of them is what Charles mentioned. There are plans and programs to reorient the teachers. Because we've lost quite a bit in terms of time.
This is futuristic, right?
Yes, yes. But the plans are on already. Yes, the Department of Teacher Education has been working out a program because we are aware that one, as Philbert said, there are some teachers who have been psychologically disoriented. So they themselves need help. Two, we have lost a lot of time in terms of learning. So if we are to catch up with the learning, then teachers need to be equipped with competencies that will help them effectively deliver, but maybe in a shorter time. With competencies that will help them to know what are the core concepts, what are the core things we should teach, what can children learn by themselves at home, how do we do things differently from what we are doing.
I see.
So those plans and programs for that are underway already. The train of trainers have already been trained, and we hope that every teacher will have an opportunity to rethink in view of the time that we have lost. But secondly, I'm excited about what Philbert has said, recognizing your teacher. Each of us has a certain teacher, whether it was for P1 or for preschool, like for Romy who attended preschool.
Indeed. It came in handy. Go ahead.
Or at high school, or even at university. There is someone significant who made a very significant change in your life.
Indeed.
One of the greatest things in life is to be appreciated. And once you are helped to know that, oh, you made a difference, then it makes you a better person. Teaching per se is not so much of what we do in class. It's the whole entire life. How you relate to these learners, how you give them hope, how you set the pace, how you know. And the exciting thing about teaching, and I'm so proud to be a teacher, very proud to be a teacher. Indeed, teaching is the most noble profession, because through teaching, our products are human.
Yes.
Yes, it's not about files and laptops and machines which die. No, they are human. You meet them in life, and you see your contribution towards an individual's life and how they can contribute to their own lives, their societies, and their country. So teaching is the greatest. I want to really say that teachers, we should be proud of that we are teachers. We should be excited that we are teachers, because it's us who impact life and who impact humanity. So yes, the sector has all those plans. It's been struggling over the months to see how the 20 billion could be actualized. Hoping that soon our teachers in the private schools can access that money.
20 billion.
20 billion, yes.
Both public and private.
Yes, but mainly for those who have really not been having a salary.
All right.
At least those who have had a salary. It's not much, but it's something. It's better than nothing. So we hope that those, especially most needed along that direction, will be able to access that money. And as Philbert has said, many people have started rethinking. Should I finish my lesson at 4 and go to sit with friends, or can I use from 4 to 7 next day to do something else? So indeed, yes, this heavy cloud of COVID-19 came with a silver lining. People are beginning to know that, oh, I can teach, but I can also do something to contribute towards my life and my family. So we look forward to having that money in the hands of the teachers. There is a process that has to happen. It's public money, so it has to go through a process, but it's there. And we are conscious of the fact that they are there, and we are hoping that they can be assisted.
All right.
And we look forward to opening.
All right.
Yeah, we
you look forward to the reopening. We shall task you on how you plan to
look forward
do
to the
that.
reopening.
Indeed.
Yes,
that is Dr. Turiajenda Kedras. She is from the Education Standards Directorate under the Ministry of Education and Sports. What she has largely given us are futuristic plans on how they plan to improve the welfare of the teachers. But largely, what we also want to know is what are some of those plans that the Education Ministry put in play or in place to ensure that teachers get through the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, let me bring in the Public Relations Officer for the Ministry of Education and Sports, that is Dennis Mujimba, is joining us via Zoom. Dennis Mujimba, let us in on some of those interventions you expedited during this COVID-19 pandemic. Not futuristic, the plans that you put in place, or the interventions that you expedited to ensure that our teachers pull through this pandemic with their psychological welfare intact. Mujimba.
Thank you so much, our host, for this time. And thank you so much, UNESCO, for this opportunity and for reminding us of why we need to celebrate our teachers. And I think as our panelists, my fellow panelists have already said, there is no one really that can underestimate the value of teachers, not just to the life of a person, but also to the life of a nation. We may hold different perspectives on whether they are the #1 profession in a country or not, but at least we know they are important. And government has really seen that to the dot, as much as is possible within the means of government. I think as a sector, we have benefited from the interventions government has put in place, first of all, to ensure the safety of our teachers. As Dr. Kedres clearly put it, we have an estimated 550,000 teaching workforce, that is from the preschools up to university. And to put this maybe in a more categorical perspective, you have about 350,000 teachers from the private sector. And then you have about 190,000 from the public sector. Now, this, if you take an average that a household of Uganda has about 5 people, if you exclude the teacher, him or herself, so you have about 2.2 million people that are really depending on the livelihood and brought in by the teacher. So we not only have teachers as instruments of bread earning in the homes, but you also have teachers as first aid givers, let me put it that way. So in the home, you have dependents, about 2.2 million people. So when the plight of the teacher is affected, you're affecting at least 4 other people on average in this country. Now, for the government side, that is why you see within the means that government could afford, it continued paying a salary to these teachers who are on the payroll, in spite of the fact that they knew they were not at the workstation for conditions which were not brought about by the teacher, him or herself. So I think that alone is a good gesture. And we really thank government that we did not see any employee layoffs, because in such times that are really hard, everyone is looking to the state for guidance, for support, for leadership, for comfort, for encouragement. So we thank government for that compassionate heart and attitude towards the teaching workforce. But as our panelists have already said, the same cannot be said in the same breath as the 350,000 estimated teachers in the private sector who have within 6 months after March 2020, when the first lockdown was instituted, we saw proprietors of schools writing letters suspending or terminating contracts of these teachers. And this was really harsh. It's not, again, it was something not in the control of the proprietors. They exhausted the reserves they had at the institutions. But it's it's really tough. It's tough for the teachers in the private sector, really tough at all levels, from pre-primary up to university level. And mind you, government pays way, way better than the teachers in the private sector. So if the little that you've been having is also taken away, it really hits really hard. So we've had, with no empirical evidence that some teachers in the private sector may leave the profession, but our prayer is that it's just for a short time. And once we reopen, we should be able to gauge the exact picture and perhaps see resumption of duty. But on the first aid analogy of what a teacher is and means to us, the teacher is our first aid giver. The teacher is our health worker in the education sector. The teacher is our doctor, is that nurse. The teacher, we look at the teacher in our sector as that frontline security person. The teacher, we look at the teacher as our defense, as our foot soldier, as our special forces, as our police officer, as our the all-in-all professional that we look at in our sector equivalent is really the teacher, because they are so central. Without the teacher, we cannot do much. Therefore, ensuring the safety of teachers is very paramount. And that is why right from the time the government came up with a plan for vaccination, which really right now is the major avenue we have for imputing protection upon the whole population. Government prioritized teachers within the priority categories. You know, we had the frontline health workers, we had security, we had teachers, we had the elderly, we had the vulnerable groups, people with pre-existing conditions. So the teachers, government really regards teachers in that high regard. And we can proudly say that as of yesterday, we have about 54% of our teaching workforce vaccinated. This is slightly over 300,000 teachers, which is good. It is not where we would want it to be, but it is a good sign that we are moving in the right direction. And from what we are hearing from the Minister of Health, this figure may actually be a lot higher if we get the data from the district. So government has prioritized the safety of teachers. If you hear the discussion that is going on, and from the words of the head of state, the words from our Honorable Minister, Janet Museveni, she has said we have to have vaccinated teachers return to work. Why is it? Even if the people they help, that is the learners, get off with the mild forms of COVID-19, it doesn't mean that the virus that the children have is less virulent. I mean, if it goes into the life, the body of an adult, it can wreak much havoc. So safety of teachers is central to reopening, because they are the most vulnerable. You've been seeing bills of people who have gone to ICUs, living deaths of more than 100 million. If you compare it with what a teacher earns in this country, you don't want a teacher to go into ICU. I mean, where will they get all that money to pull them through? So safety of teachers is what government is prioritizing. Above all, we have to have safe teachers, because once you don't have safe teachers, then you also don't have safe learners, in terms of they can easily infect the learners, but also if the learners infect the teachers get it off worse. Then number two, if you don't have a teacher in the classroom, you will not have effective learning taking place. Government has done it quite some remarkable progress in reducing the ratio of how many teachers we have per student, especially in the secondary education subsector. Now, if you lose teachers for one reason or another, either because they're indisposed or they have lost their lives, then you're going to make a situation which we are trying to invest in and improve worse. So by all means, in this context of COVID-19, the paramount intervention is to ensure that you protect your critical assets in education service delivery, and that is the teacher, the teacher, the teacher. Thank you.
5 minutes, but I haven't had a single intervention today, and we're talking about the teachers who are at the heart of the education recovery system. And of course, I do have Dennis Mujimba, the PRO at the Education Ministry. I also do have Dr. Tudia Agenda Kedra. She is from the Education Standards Directorate under the Ministry of Education. We also have Drekabo Charles. Well, that is the program coordinator at the UNESCO program office here in Kampala. A great gentleman. We also do have Philbert Baguma representing as the Secretary General, the Uganda National Teachers Association. Philbert Baguma. Uganda. There we go. Mr. Philbert Baguma.
Yes.
Let's talk about the interventions the government has put in place to help the welfare of the teachers in that regard, or to pull through this pandemic. Do you think government has put in place enough or sufficient interventions to ensure that you pull through as far as socioeconomic interventions are concerned?
Well, enough may not be qualified under the current circumstances because we are in a new world order which they have termed to be the new normal. And nobody has expertise in dealing with it. Of course, we would have liked to have more and more. But it was not possible, especially our brothers and sisters in the private subsector.
The 300,000 teachers.
Who do not have a salary at all. They do not have anything that is coming to them. And they also have a life to live. They also rent houses. They also go to hospitals like any other person. They have families to look after. Those would have liked to have something that is put on the table. Now, it was unfortunate that even when the money was pronounced, there was no mechanism to reach every teacher in the private subsector at that time. And this has delayed, and you know, any money from the consolidated fund has issues. There are so many players who must come in. Before you release it, you need to look at the legal part of it. And as such, they have not received money even after 1 year. More than 1 year now, they haven't received it. Now, like
meaning the
other,
chances of having these teachers coming back into the system are actually negligible.
Of course, there are some who have gone to do other jobs. We may call them odd jobs simply because by training, people expect to see you in a necktie, in a suit, as a teacher. Now, when they meet you doing other jobs,
frying chapatis, border riding,
then they say, why is the teacher doing this? What will happen when he returns back to class? How will the learners look at this teacher? But essentially, anything that can bring food on your table, regardless of, because if I am selling tomatoes and at the end of the day they are bringing food on my table, it wouldn't be an odd job. But because they attach that respect to the teaching profession and the teacher, then they look at you as some, you will make news. They start saying the teacher was selling tomatoes. What's wrong? What's wrong with it?
I see.
If I can sell tomatoes and have food on my table. So that is the extent we have gone to. You have seen, you know, the media enjoy that kind of news reporting. They have indicated the teachers making bricks. But if I were going to construct and I was making bricks for my house, would that be a challenge to report? But because of the current scenario, because they know teachers in the private subsector are not earning a salary, whatever they see you doing is attributed to not having food on the table, and therefore you are regarded in that category.
I see. Mr. Baguma, as the Secretary General of UNAT, what kind of interventions do you want government to put in place to improve the welfare of the teachers?
First of all, away from the pandemic, the teacher needs to be supported and facilitated. One time they asked the Chancellor of Germany why she was paying teachers better than any other person. And she had a simple answer, that these teachers are the ones who make all other professionals. And therefore, you shouldn't question why I am paying them better than any other professional.
So you're advocating
here,
for pay.
Here it is the reverse. And therefore, I would make a call to see the teachers well trained. That is the first thing. Well trained, supported and facilitated to do their work. Once the teachers are motivated to do the work, there is no doubt you will have the quality of education you desire to have. But the moment the teachers go to school, yes, they are teaching, but they still have issues with the way they live. Then the input they make will not be to the expected level, and therefore the outcomes of the learning process will be lacking because of that lack of motivation.
All right. Phil Badbaguma, Secretary General of the Uganda National Teachers Union, thank you very much. Let's also bring in a representative of UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization that is funding this show. Also other partners like UNICEF and so forth. But then let's talk about what kind of interventions you put in place besides such talk shows, funding them and ensuring visibility of the plight of the teachers among the members of the public. What other tangible interventions have you put in place as UNESCO and other implementing partners to ensure that we improve the welfare of these teachers here in Uganda and beyond?
Yeah, thank you very much, Romeo, and thank you, my co-panelists here. And I think you have already seen from the trend of our discussion here now that we have a problem.
Yeah.
And the COVID-19 just exposed how vulnerable as an institution in terms of the education services we are. I think the first challenge that has been raised here and that we are struggling to appreciate is how, as a country, we have tried to deal with the teachers, especially from the private sector, institutions. I think, for me, the first thing to have been done is not to take the teacher away from the payroll. And what will be the most effective way not to take the teacher from the payroll in that circumstance is to ensure and guarantee that there is continued learning taking place. But because we did not prepare ourselves for that, we have learned. So some of the interventions that I will speak of are things that we want to put in future. Should this kind of situation arise again, how are we going to prepare to ensure that continued learning takes place?
Go ahead.
That we do not break off and therefore take the teacher off the payroll.
Yes, Charles.
One thing that has come and that the UNESCO is supporting with other partners is to ensure digital learning or virtual learning, if you like. That there should be a mechanism in the country where learners continue to access learning as they would have in a classroom in digital ways. So working together with the Ministry of Education through what they refer to as the digital agenda, the strategy, we're trying to look for ways to ensure that should such a situation arise, how are we going to make sure that the learning continues to take place? And when the learning continues to take place, even in the private sector, there is going to be an opportunity for these people to be on the payroll.
Indeed.
So I think that's one of the efforts that UNESCO is working with other partners towards guaranteeing continued learning takes place in the institution. Of course, there are other measures that we are also engaging with the government. And the issue of continued retooling
of the teachers
to provide an opportunity for the teacher to have other life skills for survival, just beyond teaching or depending on teaching or earning from the teaching. Whereas Philbert has said that when they see teacher doing other jobs people regard as odd jobs, they start laughing at that teacher. We would like to take that stigma away.
that actually you can prepare the teacher to be able to prepare and have some kind of an alternative livelihood beyond earning salary from teaching.
I see.
So there are other mechanisms that we're putting in place with the other partners to ensure that
mechanisms that we shall continue to break down as we continue,
Absolutely.
you know, divulging information on the plight of the teachers moving forward. We shall have conversations. We did have one yesterday. We are having one today. We shall have another on the 29th, the 30th, and also the 1st of October. We shall largely be talking about teachers and how we can improve their welfare during this COVID-19 pandemic, because they are at the heart of the education recovery system. Well, let's also bring in Dr. Agenda Kedras. What kind of interventions, measures, if you will, have you put in place as government, education ministry, if you will, to ensure a safe reopening where all teachers are brought back into the fold? We do not want a situation whereby you reopen and there are no teachers to teach the learners.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. I think the first intervention is what Dr. Mujimba mentioned, the prioritizing of teachers for vaccination. And on this, I want to really appeal to all teachers, wherever you are, to use every opportunity available to make sure that you are vaccinated.
And those who abandoned the profession, what are you doing to bring them back?
They will come back
on their own.
Nobody can run away from nobody can run away from the teaching profession.
Say the pay is bad, the pay is not attractive at all. They cannot come back. They found better chances with other professions like bricklaying and so forth. I mean, your jobs, if you will.
Well, I think as a nation, we are not short of teachers.
All right.
Because our teacher training institutions have been continually producing teachers. So in terms of having teachers, we have more than we need. So if there are some who would choose not to come back, we can still find trained professional teachers to bring on board. However, I'm confident that they will come back. You know, teaching it's just another thing. Yeah. You get that relationship with your learners, you get into that environment of knowing that you matter so much. So, yes, I'm sure they will come back. The few will not come back, definitely. There will be alternatives.
All right. Another intervention? Go ahead.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think one of the things that we, as Charles has said, we need to look at very seriously is re-equipping the teachers in every way. A lot of our teachers have been just there, as Philbert said before. They didn't care that we are in the fourth revolution. They were not caring to learn ICTs. I remember when we introduced the registration of teachers through e-systems, how people were fleeced of money by these cafe boys and saying, if we have to get you registered, you pay so much. But now, during COVID-19, all of us have been forced to know that there is no turning back. So that is, to me, a very, very positive thing, that we continue to encourage our teachers to get a little bit more on ICTs, and then when Charles and Tim and the rest of us go in to help them know how to use them for teaching, they have the basics.
Acquainting teachers with the latest technological developments. Let's also bring in Mr. Dennis Mujimba, Dr. Dennis Mujimba, if you will, the PRO for the Education Ministry, to give us his parting shots as we actually crown this conversation. Dennis Mujimba, your crowning parting shots.
Thank you. A major intervention that government has put in place through the ministry to ensure that when teachers resume duty, they are well protected, is by making the head of the institution, this is the head teacher, principal, headmaster, or vice chancellor of that institution, accountable for observance and implementation of the SOPs for COVID prevention in that school or institution. What does this mean? You need to ensure that whichever teacher shows up to teach, that teacher has been vaccinated. Whichever non-teaching staff has showed up in that institution should also be vaccinated, because you don't want a vaccinated teacher working with a non-vaccinated staff. They are exposing the learners and even the teacher. It doesn't mean when you're vaccinated, you can't get COVID. You can still get COVID, though you'll get the mild form. All you want is to reduce or eliminate COVID transmission. Then the other intervention we put in place that the head of institution has to observe for tertiary institutions is to ensure that learners who are 18 years and above get vaccinated. All these measures have to be enforced by the head of the institution by making that person accountable and responsible, and they are also the ones who are supposed to liaise between the institution of learning and the district task forces for COVID-19. Should there be any outbreak or any suspected cases of COVID, then the task force can come in. Now, the other good intervention, which I think many people our viewers may not be aware of, is that when we are reopening our teacher training institutions, they are also going to be reopened in a manner that does not cause congestion. It will be phased as well. It will be done in a manner that ensures social distancing. And by the way, the public needs to know that government has invested heavily in teacher training institutions to the extent that right now for all subjects, it is 1 student, 1 textbook ratio. This has never happened before. For all the 8 or 10 subjects that they have there, it is 1 textbook per student. Now, that alone, non-sharing of textbooks in these institutions, it in itself is a measure that reduces closeness and therefore transmission of COVID-19. Allow me also to summarize by also reminding the public that when government contributed 22 billion shillings to the Private School Teachers Association, to the private school teachers circles. This will be a revolving fund. And as of last week, that is Friday, I heard from the chairperson of the National Private School Teachers Association say that they are ready to launch, to begin availing these funds to the circles. So within the month of October, we should see something moving. This money is not within the Ministry of Education. It's now between the Microfinance Center and the private school teachers through the National Private School Teachers Association called NAPSTA. So everything is also moving well on that front. If the private school teachers can put their act together, reduce on the infighting about who should manage what, they should be able to get that benefit from government. Thank you.
Very, very insightful.